Welcome to our final webinar of 2025, everyone. My name is Piper Hendricks. I'm the CEO of Stories Change Power, and I'm so glad that you're here. If you've joined us before, you know that our speaker chooses a song to welcome you, and our speaker today just happened to choose one of my all-time favorites. Sam Cooke wrote that song, A Change is Gonna Come, after being turned away from a whites-only hotel while he was touring in the South, and then released the song in 1964. And then just this year, Rolling Stone named it its number one on the top 100 protest songs. So it feels like a very appropriate thing to end our webinar series with this year. It's also an Idealist Day. If you joined us back in October, you'll remember that an Idealist Day is that universal day where no matter if you say the month first or the day first, we all agree on the date, January 1st, February 2nd, or today, December 12th, 12/12. We will share links to learn more about Idealist Days in the recording, but basically they're a day to do something to improve your community. And Stories Change Power helps you do that to be an effective advocate for change, including by telling memorable stories in an ethical way that improve your community. And in our conversation today, you'll hear several ideas on ways to be part of the change that's going to come too. We'll get to that in just a moment. First, four very quick reminders. We have captions that are on. If they're helpful to you, please use them. We have questions in the Q&A. There should be a little box at the bottom of your screen. Please put all your questions there, and we will aim to reach as many as we can at the end. If there's any that we can't reach, we'll put those in our bonus points on LinkedIn and be sure that you get an answer. Third, we have the chat open throughout the webinar, and so please use that. We have it only there for our human friends. Your AI is welcome to watch the recording, but chat is only for humans and will not be included in the recording that we share later. We'll check in with you if we think that you might be AI, so watch for your messages. If you don't respond, we'll err on the side of caution and kick you out, basically. Lastly, we have as a webinar, you are off camera and off mic, so make yourself comfortable, do whatever you need to do to be present. And with that, it is an absolute pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Ken Powley. In 1972, Ken graduated from Principia College with degrees in mathematics and journalism. But unable to find satisfying work in either one of those fields, he started a whitewater rafting business in 1974, intending it to be a temporary venture until he figured out what his real career would be. 50 years later, he is a proud owner of the country's premier whitewater rafting outfits, which has taken more than 2 million people. That is a number that I just cannot get over. 2 million people down whitewater rivers in Pennsylvania and New York. Ken describes himself as having been, during those many decades, the poster child for every American who takes democracy for granted and had no time for civic engagement. As you'll hear Ken share, the events of January 6th caused him to reassess his priorities. He soon relinquished his day-to-day management of whitewater challengers and co-founded Team Democracy to help curb the ill effects of toxic polarization and create pathways for the kind of dialogue that's so essential to our constitutional democracy. Ken's conservative orientation complements the liberal inclinations of his co-founder, Chris Newland. With that, Ken, welcome. It is such a pleasure to have you with us today. And before we jump into our conversation, and Ken, come off mute and on camera anytime to see your beautiful face, we will move into the poll. That should be popping up on your screen soon. We have two questions. The first is, how long have you been using your civic muscle? And we invite you to think of that really broadly. It can be maybe you're a traditional advocate, maybe you're someone who's involved in your community. That can be everything from helping with a Girl Scout troop, a Boy Scout troop, to being an elected official. Think broadly. We're wondering, are you new here? Have you been in the space a good long while? Are you a pro? Take your pick there. Our second question, I'm really eager to hear folks' responses. The question is, when was the last time you had a conversation with someone across the political divide? First response is just today. I do it every day. Next is within the last week or so. Third option is at some point this year. And our fourth option there is before 2025, or you just don't remember the last time that you had a conversation with someone across the political divide. So I'm seeing lots of responses coming in. If you don't have your fingers to keyboard yet, please answer those questions. If you are joining us by car, focus on the road, be safe. We'll give folks a few more seconds here, and then we'll close the poll. If we accidentally cut you off, I do apologize. Pop those answers in the chat instead. But let's give folks another maybe 3, 2, 1, and I'll go ahead and end the poll and share those results. And Ken, it looks like we have a great mix of folks. There are some who are brand new to the space. Welcome. A few folks who have been using their civic muscle for a good while, between 3 and 7 years. And then about a quarter of the folks are pro, being here for 10 years or more. So welcome. And interesting. For our second question, when was the last time you had a conversation with someone across the political divide? Wow, 80% within the last week or so. Bravo, everybody. And then the other 20% at some point this year. And nobody just today, and nobody can't remember the last time. So that is a good mix of folks, and we're really happy that you're here to join us in this conversation. So we'll be talking about 3 different initiatives today. The first is a Safe and Fair America's Elections Pledge, or SAFE. Raft for America is the second initiative, and then the third is civic credentialing. But before we get into any of those, Ken, would you share a bit more about Team Democracy's origin story and your own background?
Yeah, sure. And oh, by the way, my video it says blocked by host, so
Oh
maybe
no,
that's on your end.
let's see.
There we go.
There we go. Welcome.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, the origin story. I could go all the way back to '72 when I started whitewater rafting, but really, what happened was I was at the American Democracy Summit in Los Angeles, and I think it was the fall of 2023, and I was in one of those innumerable breakout sessions, and somebody on stage was articulating this idea that we, as Americans, we need to start thinking and acting like we're all in the same boat together. And it's an interesting metaphor, and I'm sure it fell on my ears differently than it did on anybody else in the audience, because my immediate thought was, um, wow, that is, the idea of being in the same boat together and having to work together to get down the river, and the fact that the people on the left side of the boat have to collaborate, coordinate with the people on the right side of the boat to keep it going straight, and the fact that the sweet spot on every whitewater river is in the center. It's not off to the left, it's not way off to the right, it's down the middle. That's where you make progress, that's where the best current is, that's where your best success is. And that if the left side overpowers the right, the boat just spins in circles. I mean, all these things are going through my head, right? And I thought we ought to do that. We ought to actually get people from opposite sides of the political spectrum, pair them up, intentionally put them in a boat together, and push them out and onto the river, and let's see what happens. So we did our inaugural event on the Lehigh River in Pennsylvania. Honestly, we didn't know how it was going to go. I mean, we in theory it would work because there's science behind this idea that if you do activities together and you really get to know a person a little bit, that really softens your differences. They're still there, but you can talk about them in a little more coherent way. So that was our hope. And I remember one of the pairs we had that day was a very conservative Pennsylvania state senator matched up with a very progressive constituent from his district.
Mm.
And this woman had voted against him every opportunity, didn't like him, was very intimidated by being paired up with him. She was very
Mm.
anxious. She was anxious about doing the whitewater. She was nervous about being with him. And it started off very cool. They were not connecting. They weren't looking at each other. They weren't really talking to each other. By lunchtime, I look over and I see them sitting together having a friendly chat.
Mm.
And by the end of the day, they came off the river high-fiving, embracing each other, best of friends. And on camera, at the end of the day, this hairdresser constituent says, you know what? She says, we had so much more in common than I thought we did. I really like the guy. And then she said, I realize now that the social media vitriol that we see every day, that's just not real
Mm.
people. And my heart just skipped a beat. So we went from there to rivers all around the country. We've been to Colorado, we've been to Maine, we've been to upstate New York, rural West Virginia, and time again, the evidence is there that given half a chance, people will lean into each other, especially if there's some shared activity that they're engaged in. So my that was how I got into the rafting. But our really, if you roll back to 2021, our initial focus wasn't on raft or any of the other initiatives. It was really on the impact that January 6th had on me personally. You know, like you said, I was the poster child for no time for any of this stuff. These were problems for other people to solve. But I just, January 6th hit me like a ton of bricks. And the fact that in the following weeks, so many people in high office seemed to be telling me that what I saw that day, I really didn't see, or that what I saw that day wasn't really that bad. It was freedom of speech, or it was tourists gone awry, or whatever. And that's when I realized that this problem runs much deeper, much higher, much broader than anything it's like an insight into an America that I didn't know. It wasn't part of my 72-year experience as an American, and that we needed solutions. And those solutions probably needed to come from the bottom up, not from the top down, because if you look at polarization, where is it the worst? It's inside the Beltway. It's at the highest levels of political office. And so, like most movements, whether it's the women's suffrage movement or the civil rights movement, it starts with ordinary Americans stepping up and doing extraordinary things. So I go to bed that night thinking, I'm the most ordinary person I know. And if I don't do it, how can I expect other people to do it? So very quickly, I drafted a letter to my 2 siblings and to my wife's 5 siblings, explaining my concern and my thoughts on the matter. And one of my wife's brothers, Chris, wrote back this epic response, started a conversation that has lasted for 5 years now and led to the formation of Team Democracy. The idea being what we were experiencing in and around January 6th was an undermining of our confidence in what is arguably the most important cornerstone of American democracy, and that's elections that are reliable, elections that are accessible to eligible voters, and the peaceful transfer of power. How do we ingrain that into the people running for office so that they embrace it? So we drafted this Safe and Fair Elections Pledge, and we shopped it across the country. We got 775 candidates for elective office to commit themselves to the principles of that pledge of upholding elections that are fair, transparent, safe, accessible. And so that one of our early partners in that, as we launched this, we were a little surprised at how deeply connected to this thinking the national security space was. And so we had conversation with General Hayden. He had conversations with General McChrystal, General Hertling, Clapper, and Lute. Within weeks, the 5 of them were in a studio filming a video for Team Democracy and the Safe and Fair Elections Pledge. CBS got wind of it, and they reached out to McChrystal and Lute to do an on-air interview. And I think you have the
we would love to share that, yes, for people
real quick
to hear. Yeah. We'll pop that up. And
highlight our nation's political divisions. Several former military leaders, including retired Army General Stanley McChrystal and Army General Doug Lute, are urging Americans to recommit to this country's core principles. They are part of a group called Team Democracy that wants people to pledge that elections are conducted according to the rule of law without partisan bias. The general spoke with senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge about the new initiative and why they believe our democracy faces its greatest threat since the Civil War.
I actually think that this is as dangerous a time as we've seen in our lifetime.
Retired Army General Stanley McChrystal, who once led U.S. forces around the globe, including Afghanistan, sees America's current divisions as an issue of national security.
Because you see the symptoms of people who are disassociated from the legitimacy of the government. They are starting to question basic things like, was an election outcome valid?
I'm beginning to see, as Stan suggested, these fissures.
Retired Lieutenant General Doug Lute also served globally over a 4-decade career, including as U.S. ambassador to NATO.
These tiny fractures, these small fractures that, because of our international experience, we understand can widen and can divide America. It can actually present opportunities for our opponents.
It's not every day that you have two retired generals sit down and talk about the state of our elections. Why are you coming forward?
Our enemies would like nothing more than to find us not unified, to find us fragmented and unable to be the kind of America that they have faced before or relied on if they're allies.
I think Stan and I have seen democracies, fledgling democracies overseas, struggle to find their feet. And at least for me, I see some of those warning signs today in America.
As seasoned observers of conflict, these generals joined Team Democracy to highlight core principles.
The idea is to give every American a reminder and a commitment that safe and fair elections are fundamental to our nation and democracy.
The election was rigged, it was stolen.
Without the backing of former President Trump and his supporters, how can this work?
Well, it starts with the grassroots movement. Every American has got to step back and say, what do I really believe in about our nation? And that is that we are a democracy. What signals that? The fact that I believe and participate in the elections.
The thing that unites us is that before we were supporters of President Trump or President Biden or Obama, we were Americans. We are Americans.
Fearful of America's military superiority, these generals say our adversaries use information as a weapon to mislead, confuse, and divide.
If I were an adversary of the United States, I'd want to go after two things. First would be our political unity, our ability to make unified decisions and execute things. But I'd also want to go after our legitimacy as a nation that other nations want to emulate.
From an intelligence perspective, why are Americans so divided?
When people get messages that are very direct and often they are either intentionally or unintentionally incorrect, it changes their beliefs. And so they start to hold fundamental ideas that are contrary to facts.
It actually opens opportunities for those who would do us harm. And eventually their aim is to make us so divided that we're internally consumed, we're self-absorbed with our own problems, and we're unable to address issues overseas.
Recent CBS News polling underscores the divisions, with most Americans expecting violence after future presidential elections.
This is not the America that we've come to expect of ourselves.
I think if we look in cases where people think violence is an option or even an obligation, then we are starting to have drifted somewhere that we see in other countries far away, but it's suddenly come home, and we need to pay close attention to it.
And once that drift begins, it's very difficult to reverse it. So now is the time, as a preventive measure, we need to get in front of these divides and try to cement ourselves back together.
The generals have not announced a complete plan of action yet, but believe asking people from across the political spectrum to recommit to core democratic principles is a good starting point. And the group cites research that public pledges can drive behavior, especially when paired with public accountability efforts. Michelle.
The nation is at stake. Catherine, thank you.
We're actually in conversation over the past week with Generals Hayden, McChrystal, and Hertling to come back together again and create a PSA around the importance of turning down the heat and connecting with people across the political aisle. It'll look and feel a lot like the Mike Kelly video that we saw recently, with 5 or 6 different people weighing in. All of them really top-level military and national intelligence people. But this is really important stuff to the national security sector. And I remember sitting next to General Hayden as they were filming their original Safe and Fair Elections Pledge video. And he told me a story he said, a reporter asked me, when in my career as director of NSA, director of CIA, as a 4-star Air Force, he says, when in your career did you have the most trouble sleeping at night? Thinking he would say, some crisis with North Korea or ISIS or something. He said, last night, tonight, and tomorrow night, because what we're doing to ourselves internally is so destructive. And we don't have intelligence agencies, the military, they don't have a playbook for this. He said, we have a playbook for North Korea. It's not perfect, but we have assets. We know what our options are. for this internal divisiveness, it's really troubling from a national security perspective. You know, it undermines the strength of the country terribly. So,
and it's such a helpful reminder. I think we can see a small view sometimes where, thinking most recently at the Thanksgiving table, sitting down together, and there could be divisions between friends and family, or we see the tension in our social media feed. So to pull back and see the impact it has on us as a country is huge. And I think about the Bridging Civic Divides Act, where we talk about the impact economically, the impact on workplace. I mean, the ripple effect cannot be underestimated. So really appreciate the work you're doing here, raising the awareness about like this is also a national security issue. If I'm remembering, I think the Carter Centers and Ford Centers had similar initiatives at the time. Is that right?
yeah, they did. They had a program, an initiative called Candidate Principles for Trusted Elections, and we actually had a series of conversations with them about weekly over about 3 or 4 months, thinking in the lead up to that midterm election, maybe we would merge our two efforts because they were really very similar, and the language they had was similar to ours. Um, it turned out we couldn't quite get that together. They wanted to keep a very tight control on who they approached about the pledge, and they only wanted to connect with certain specific subset of candidates. We thought it was really important to get on social media and to get grassroots Americans involved, because when grassroots Americans care about this, then their elected leaders care a little bit more about it. So we each went our separate ways. We ended up getting 775 candidates to sign. I think their total was around 135, and they reached out to us afterwards and said, "Exactly, how did you get so many?" And our budget was like $12,000. Their budget was enormous. So we explained what we did, and we actually they hired my co-founder to sit on the Carter Center working group to try to elevate their efforts to match ours. And their internal IT people had real trouble replicating what Chris was doing. Long story short, Carter Center decided that we were smaller, nimbler, more creative in our approach to this, and we could do things that they couldn't do. So they basically took their budget for the candidate principles and shifted it over to us to run the program. And so going forward, we're managing the Carter Ford Center efforts as well as our own, and they're more in line with each other now. It's no longer called Candidate Principles for Trusted. It's Principles for Trusted Elections. So it applies to the implication is it applies to candidates, but it also applies to grassroots Americans.
I love it. And you touched on this earlier too, but there's so much power in grassroots. I'm thinking of an example coming out of Braver Angels and some work in New Jersey, where there's a contrast between an effort that was incredibly well funded and a lot of star power and really didn't have much of an impact. And then another that was built on networking and really, working with people who were on the ground who knew their stuff on a, pretty meager budget. So to be clear, I'm not saying that any of this work should not be funded. We all need to be funded, but you can really have an impact with some smart grassroots work. So I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
And I think there's an advantage. Sometimes smaller organizations, like I said, we're a couple of people, and so we can turn on a dime. We can take advantage of opportunities that pop up in 24 hours. I love the Carter Center. I love the work that they do, the collaborative work they do with the Ford Center. But they are larger bureaucracies, and decisions that Chris and I can make in 15 minutes would take, sometimes 15 weeks or months for those larger organizations to. So, and I think to their credit, they recognize that, and they realize they get better bang for the buck if we took the reins.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we need all of us, right? The big battleships
Absolutely.
and the little nimble ships, which is a bit of a transition into your second initiative. And that's how I've known you the best, is through Raft for America. And I even had the chance to go down the James earlier this year, which was absolutely amazing. How did that work get started?
Well, like I said, I was at the ADS thing, and I heard somebody say we should all be in the same boat together, and very quickly. I mean, we went from that to launching the program in about 2 weeks. It was
Wow.
one of those let's do this. All we had is let's do this, because there was a lot of science out there about. And I had talked to Carissa at Listen First, and Pierce and a bunch of other people. Actually, Pierce was at the same conference, and he and I. And Chris were at one of those finger food tables in between sessions, and Monica Guzman walked up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know Pierce Godwin, but he's a very gregarious.
And we will put all the links to all of these fabulous organizations.
Hugs everybody, gives Monica a huge hug.
We're naming in the resources.
Yeah. And so he says to me, he says, Ken, tell Monica the origin story for Team Democracy, because it's the coolest story I've ever heard. So I tell Monica the story. And that conversation led to, I was kind of joking about the idea of doing a raft thing. And on the other side of the table, I could see Pierce's wheels turning. And he said, that's not a bad idea. And so we took it a little more seriously, and we fleshed it out. And then the next spring, we launched our first event. I see Chip York is on the call here from Business for America. One of the interesting things I tell everybody, Raft for America is not about rafting. Rafting is just the tool. It's the vehicle, it's the shiny, glittery, fun, eccentric, unusual, compelling, visually compelling thing. And because it's that, it has the ability to attract earned media. And, CBS found us, we didn't find them. Local ABC, Fox affiliates have shown up and gone on these trips. We often complain that media presents just negative messaging. We don't do enough work to create positive messaging that they will put on the air that's interesting enough and different enough. And Raft for America is that to a T. Every news outlet that has showed up to film one of these events has gone away at the end of the day going, wow, Major Garrett, I wouldn't have believed what I saw today if I hadn't been here. He told me at a dinner after the event, he said, when I got this assignment to film you guys, he said, I thought it was a cotton candy piece. I thought it was going to be a, fluff piece, kumbaya, blah, blah, blah. He said, what I saw happen, the transformations I saw happen between people in the raft that I was in today was just unbelievable. And he said it's restored his faith. And he said, political reporting over the last 5 years, he asked me, do you know what it's like to be a reporter these days? I said, I can't imagine. He said, it's like eating razor blades for breakfast. And then it goes all downhill from there. And he said, this story really warms my heart and gives me hope that it's not as bleak as we often think it is. But it's really all about creating content that is relevant. We got 10 million views from that one trip down a river. That's the kind of stuff we need to get what we do in front of eyeballs that are not in our bubble, and as good as these events are, it's still, probably most of the people here today are already engaged in this work. And so we need to get to the tens or hundreds of millions of people who are still sitting on the couch. Yeah. And that's what Raft is kind of able to do. So I don't know, you have the
we've got a video. We'll share that with folks, and I'll say we'll play that and we'll continue.
7 weeks from now, we will be eagerly awaiting the first returns of Campaign 2024. This has been an especially divisive election cycle marked by the kind of rhetoric that's further fraying our national unity. For tonight's Eye on America, CBS's Major Garrett visited the battleground state of North Carolina to see how people from all parts of the political spectrum are navigating the turbulent waters of this election season.
On the western edge of swing state North Carolina cuts the Nantahala River, an unlikely spot for an experiment in reconciliation. About 30 Americans came here to navigate the Nantahala on rafts and probe the limits of political estrangement.
I am a Southern Baptist physical conservative.
I am open-minded politically.
I'm pragmatic progressive is what I call myself.
They are liberals and conservatives, independents and libertarians, sure to oppose one another on all manner of ideas and issues.
We don't talk about what's working enough.
We've turned away from God, for one thing.
We have lost so much of our humility.
But they're willing to talk and paddle together toward something deeper.
As Americans, we really are all in the same boat together.
Ken Powley is the organizer, a career rafting guide with no professional political experience who worries deeply about American alienation.
I'm the guy that always thought of democracy like the air you breathe. It's always going to be there.
Powley set about this work the day after the Capitol riot, deciding to devote his retirement years to binding our political wounds.
What is the essence of this experiment?
Bringing people together with different points of view has become difficult. And what we're finding is that what unites us is a lot more powerful than what separates us.
The Reverend Rodney Sadler came along for the ride.
I'm not fond of Trump at all.
Sadler, a self-described liberal from Charlotte, landed in the same boat as conservative Lance Mosley, an actor and PR professional who lives out of an RV.
I don't understand why everybody's so afraid of Trump. He's better for the country. That's my view.
Lance and the Reverend found things chilly at first. So did everyone on their boat.
So we've disagreed on everything.
Yeah.
You're Samsung, I'm iPhone.
Yeah, we don't even agree on anything.
The rafts made their way down the Nantahala Rapids with teamwork and enthusiasm.
Everybody's closer to each other than we think.
No matter who we might vote for or anything else. So I think this is a great first step.
Near the end, choppy waters tossed one rafter harmlessly overboard. A day on the river buoyed Reverend Sadler and Lance Mosley.
I think we are so divided that we don't spend the time to get to know people as human beings.
By the end of the trip, we were finally talking deeper politics.
Yeah.
Love you, brother.
Enjoyed you, brother.
Oh, man, I did too.
Cynics will find all of this a bit too tidy.
How much does the river have to do with it?
This isn't really about rafting. The point of it is that when we play together, it allows us to form relationships that otherwise we would never even consider.
This touches you. I've seen it in your eyes.
It does touch me because it's so crystal clear that we are so much better than what we're showing.
For Ken Powley, a river runs through that noble pursuit. For Eye on America, I'm Major Garrett on the Nantahala River in North Carolina.
That is so inspiring, Ken. And I'm reminded how important it is if we want people, things to catch on, it's got to be, fun, easy, and popular. And I think that, you could argue about how easy it is to not get thrown overboard, but the fun, I mean, we forget that, right? It feels like there's so much work and it's so important and it's so urgent. And so I'm just so grateful to you for bringing some fun back into this space.
One of the things as we look to 2026 is to not only continue the Raft for America events. Raft for America was the right place for us to start with this because the metaphor is so powerful about coming together and working together in the same boat. But the reality is that if you asked 100 Americans, here's a free rafting trip, 99 of them wouldn't go. It's not something that most people connect with or relate to. Also, every state doesn't have whitewater rivers. This is something we can scale to a certain degree, but we're limited by where the rivers are. Very few people have whitewater rafts in their garage, but everybody has bicycles in their garage, and
at least one, maybe more.
At least one, if not many. And there are bicycle clubs everywhere, and there are phenomenal bicycle trails everywhere. So we're gonna launch in 2026 Cycle for America. Raft for America, RAFT, stands for Reuniting America by Fostering Trust. Cycle, CYCLE, stands for Challenging Your Countrymen to Listen with Empathy. That's the anagram for Cycle. And so with Cycle, we have the ability to do these events, to develop a toolkit and give it to local organizations that they can do these events in communities all across the country. Get it really down to a local level and show them how how to manage these, and we have partners like Living Room Conversations and Listen First and all the rest who can really provide the training, the skill sets, the guidance for how to facilitate these conversations. And I think it's going to be awesome.
Oh, I have no doubt. I'll be pumping up my wheels and being ready. And I think about how many they're statewide. You've got Rails to Trails, bike paths across
Absolutely.
the country, and as you mentioned, bike clubs. I mean, it feels very accessible, and I'm excited to see how that goes. And we will definitely be amplifying that work as it gets going. And I see, Chip, thank you for sharing the 5 specific strategic actions in the chat. We will include that in the resources as well. As you're getting a sense already, there's a lot of good things ahead for 2026.
I want to call out Chip for his invaluable help in getting the messaging of Raft for America in front of businesses who value that messaging and want to see their brands aligned with it. We had a breakthrough in 2025 in getting our first major corporate sponsor, Johnsonville Sausage, the largest manufacturer of brats and sausages in America, is deeply interested in this kind of let's turn down the heat, let's reconnect, because that's good for their brand, that's good for their business. They sell more sausages when people have more backyard cookouts, right? And they're having less of those cookouts because they're afraid to invite crazy Uncle Harry, who's going to blow the whole thing up and start a food fight. So they have every reason, as we do, to promote this messaging of turning down the heat. And we collaborated on one event last year, and we're really looking forward to working with them and with other corporate interests in 2026.
I really appreciate that, and I'll add my thanks to Chip and all the work that his organization is doing, because it really does. This impacts every single area of our lives, and it feels like there have been many folks, as you did, who kind of put that aside and said this is something for other folks to worry about. And I hope it's becoming more clear to folks. This is foundational. This is like our house is set on this foundation, and if we don't have a healthy, functioning system of government, what else are we going to put on top of that? And so all of this, whether it's because you're wanting to sell sausages or you just love biking or rafting, I mean, there's a place for everybody in this, and a need for everybody to be involved.
I'm not a sausage guy, but I felt compelled to try them, since they were our sponsor. They're actually quite good.
That's quite a testament.
It is. I'm surprised that I liked them as much as I did.
I love it. I appreciated the messaging on turning down the heat, and it will make me go out and try them just for that reason.
Well, if you look at their Turn Down the Heat ad campaign from the prior year, it's all about backyard barbecue. The visuals are, very diverse looking people having fun together, but the best way to cook a sausage is on low heat. And so they talk about turning down the heat to keep sausages juicy and flavorful, but it's a metaphor for let's just
it's fabulous. We'll include that in the resources as well. And for anybody who's on the East Coast time or getting close to lunchtime, remember, you're off camera. So if you need to go make a sausage right now and have some lunch, enjoy. So
the other interesting point, speaking of businesses and their desire to get involved, I know it's really tough for businesses to stand up, and they're afraid of getting a target on their back like Disney and so many others did. But I was at a PACE convening a year or two ago, and Jeff Wasden from State Business Executives quoted a figure that blew my mind. He said that the cost to American businesses of polarization and divisiveness is enormous. And I thought, okay, it's a big number. He quoted $2 billion a day, $2 billion a day, American business community losing because of polarization, whether it's inefficiency in the workplace or absenteeism or lower productivity. So businesses have billions and billions of reasons to want to turn down the temperature. And so we just need to find the right partners to help us with that messaging.
Yeah. And our friends at Resolutionaries have been phenomenal champions of this. And again, I'll mention that the Building Civic Bridges Act, and that's gaining bipartisan support on the Hill, and there's a lot of reasons that we need to be. And I really appreciated earlier what you were saying, how that the reflection of what's online does not reflect how we are in person. And so getting people out of the online bubbles where we have conflict entrepreneurs who are benefiting from this us versus them and all the polarization, but it's not benefiting us individually or as a country.
Yeah, I've served on a local youth soccer board for almost 40 years now. And for many of those years, we had our monthly meetings in person in the school library, right? And they were very cordial, very civil. When email came in, we started doing them online.
Mm-hmm.
And it was stunning how contentious those meetings became. Because people were so willing to say things in an email or in a chat or a text that they would never say in person. And so, I mean, this plays out at the national level, at the local level, even within organizations sometimes.
Yeah. I'm reminded of, since the holidays, you can think of as a kid, you get a new present and you take it out of the box and it's just the best thing ever. And then within a week, you're kind of tired of it. A month, like, maybe a couple years later, you've outgrown it.
Right.
By no means do I think we'll do that with social media and things online. Obviously, there's a lot of really, good ways to connect and use the technology that we have. But I am hopeful that we'll increasingly recognize the value of being offline, of being in person together, and having, it may not be as convenient as, since we don't always go into an office, depending on your job, depending on your circumstances. But I'm hopeful that we will have a little bit of a sense of that. Okay, this whole online mess, we'll get a little bit tired of it. And that's one of the many things I appreciate when you're on the raft. Hopefully you're not on your phone. You're really there present with people.
Yep, exactly.
So I would love to turn to the third initiative. And just a reminder to everybody on the call, as you've got questions, please put those in the Q&A. We would love to hear what's on your mind. But our courses at Stories Change Power all offer a civic credential, and that's recognizing that the skills that we cover, even Storytelling 101, are all in service of being civically engaged. And that's been a lot of fun to award those civic credentials and have people be able to show, I made the time, I made the effort, I've put this energy into learning this skill. And I understand that Team Democracy is launching a whole credentialing system. Would you share why that's an initiative that you say can be a real game changer?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, my partner he's comes from 4 decades at IBM. He's a tech guy. He's one of the smartest human beings intellectually that I know, and he's also visionary. And he has a real ability to take lessons from the private sector and say, how does this work in the civic space or the democracy space? One of the tools that big companies, including his, have used for decades is this thing called digital badging. Instead of giving somebody a paper certificate, which ends up in a desk drawer or on the wall at home that nobody ever sees, large companies drive their employees to participate in particular activities or courses by awarding them a digital badge, which they can then brag. They can attach it to their LinkedIn profile. They can put it in their social media platforms. So, it gets seen forever, over and over, by everybody they engage with on social media. It's not hiding in an office somewhere or in a desk drawer. And B, whoever issued that credential gets recognition over and over. It's free advertising for the organization that issues the badge. So it's really an enormous win-win. So he said to me one night, why don't we do digital badging in the democracy space? Why don't we make it cool for people to take a civics course, to engage in a civic activity? It could be poll working. It could be, taking a course. It could be one of your programs. And so I was slow to get the idea, but he kept working on it, and he kept waiting for me to catch up with him. He reached out to Accredly and Credible, the 2 largest digital badge platforms in the world. To work with them, the digital badges were around $2 a piece. He then contacted 4 or 5 others, and landed on a company called Open Badge Factory. They're based in Canada. And we were able to, they got so excited about the concept of digital badging in the civic engagement space. Don Present, their owner, is fond of saying, this is the most exciting application of digital badging he's seen in his career. He is so excited about it. We've got an agreement with him that the badge is going to come in around 10 cents. I mean, that's 5% of the market value. So they're basically almost free. We can onboard organizations. When we look around the universe of nonprofits, I read somewhere there's 10,000 nonprofits across this country, large, small, in between, working in one way or another on bridge building or collaboration or civics or democracy. 10,000 organizations. So as Team Democracy, we look at it and say, there's a lot of really smart people doing really great work across the field. Why should we try to reinvent the wheel? Wouldn't it be better if we could find a way to elevate the work of all 10,000 of those organizations? If we could boost their reach by 5% or 10%, that would be massive. And that's what the credentialing does. It takes every program that's out there and it incentivizes people to take the course. It rewards the person for taking it, and it advertises it to the rest of the universe, including people outside of our bubble who all the people inside of our bubble interact with. So I'm really excited about this. And we have one more video. If you can tee up this, this is just a cute little thing to get to kind of grasp the idea of what it is and why it's important.
As a nonprofit working to build a healthier democracy, it's critical to expand your membership and energize your supporters. And yet, traditional engagement methods often fall short. Team Democracy's civics credentialing system uses open digital badge technology that lets you engage members and collaborate with other nonpartisan democracy nonprofits in expansive new ways. With the platform, you and other nonprofits can issue data-rich, verifiable credentials to supporters who complete training, make commitments, or participate in activities. You can also create credential pathways and gamification to encourage your members' further development and deeper involvement. As you collaborate with other nonprofits on the platform, you can expand your reach and amplify your impact. The open digital badges facilitate sharing on social media and other platforms, expanding your organization's reach even further. And because the system provides robust analytics, you'll know which of your programs and messaging work best. The Civics Credentialing System is a win for your organization and your supporters. It's a win for our larger nonprofit community, and it's a win for our democracy. Contact Team Democracy to learn more today.
I love it. And yes, we will include that in the chat. Actually in the resources coming after the webinar and in the recording. I'll say, as a nonprofit who had done some research before you developed this program, there's some costs that are prohibitive with some other options. And so not only the cost, but now having this be part of the larger ecosystem, and we'll include a link to the democracy ecosystem map. I think we're definitely over 10,000 now. I'm not remembering the exact number, but it's exciting. It's growing, and having all these different local organizations, then some with a national reach, all connected. I can feel the power even in watching that video of having more opportunity for people to learn about the work that's underway. So thank you for that.
And one of the trends these days that you hear over and over again is we want to inspire more collaboration between the organizations in this ecosystem. That's what civics credentialing does. Because when I earned my first badge, you know how at the end of a Netflix show you get a list of, you might like these as well across the bottom of the screen. Well, that's what this does. You get your first badge, and then it automatically says, here are other ones similar to this that you might be interested in. So you get cross-pollination of people across multiple organizations, and you can actually gamify this thing the way companies like Duolingo have, where if you get these 5 badges, now you qualify for this, and you march your way up to, democracy champion at the very top. But there's so much we can do with this to expand the reach of those 10,000 organizations. And the trend now in education is toward moving away from the traditional report card model and actually using digital credentialing to monitor kids' progress in school and in college. And so there's a massive opportunity for this to weave in, awards for civic engagement, civic participation, even at the high school level. And if we get kids at that age accustomed to earning digital badges for cool stuff like poll watching, it can inspire a lifelong pattern of behavior which is what we need. Civic engagement cannot be one and done. It's got to
it's lifelong. Yeah.
A process.
Yeah, and identity, a shift in our identity. I'm reminded of the work of civic builders in Minnesota, working with a lot of youth. And I'm reminded of the conversation Mike Koenig and I had last month in our webinar about finding your space in the broader movement. And I love how that the credentialing can do that. You come in with one course and here's other things that might be of interest. So finding that is amazing. So questions, if you've got Q&A, if you can put those in the little box there. I'm seeing that the question from Mike here about the relationship with the Carter Center. Is there more that you would like to add? We'll have the earlier response in the recording, but do you have an ongoing relationship now with the Carter Center?
We served, Chris actually had a Carter Center email address for about a year when he was in their work group working with them. What the decision recently was that they really couldn't really manage it going forward, not only because of the operational complexity, but because their attorneys suggested that they were on thin ice as a 501c3 engaging with candidates, even if it was just to sign a pledge.
Mm-hmm. So
one of the things they reached out to us about was, are you or could you be a C4? For them to open a C4 for what amounts to 1% of their work didn't make sense. But being the nimble people that we are, we formed Team Democracy Action as a C4, and so that way we can run all of the candidate work through the C4, and all the lawyers are happy.
Good. Keeping lawyers happy is important.
It's very important.
I had a question for you. I think a lot about how many groups struggle to reach everyday Americans, to reach community members in a variety of places. There's a lot of organizations that do a lot of talking to elected officials, and we need some of that. To academics, we need that too. Sometimes just to each other, that's probably not as helpful. If we're going to have a thriving democracy, we need to get more people off the sidelines, or as you said, off the couch. What advice would you give to those organizations?
Boy, that's a great question. I think at the top of the list is find ways to get people together in real life and outside of the social media, outside of the webinars. Do events. I've talked to Mari Giles from Braver Angels, and I think they're coming to this same realization. They've got 149 local affiliates who go out and appeal to people in their area to come engage in bridge building, which is conversations and learning bridging skills. And that's great. But what Mari is encouraging them to do is become more multi-layered than that. Have a barbecue, have an event where people come together for something else other than just the work, the work of connecting. Make it fun. The more fun people have, the more they lean into each other. And so this is one of the synergies we see with Cycle for America, that we can inject that can be a tool that all those local Braver Angels affiliates use to create an event. And it's easy. They can partner with a local bike club. They can invite people to come in There can be food. I'm sure Johnsonville will show up with their sausages. There can be food. There can be an activity, and there can be conversation. And I think that we need to find creative, real life ways to reach out to people and make it fun for them to get involved. I'm at the point where having a really interesting, thoughtful conversation with somebody from the other side of the aisle is actually fun. And actually, I walk away from it feeling like a better person and a more informed person, because it occurred to me about a year ago that we have all become experts at everything. We all think we're experts at every policy issue known to man. But the world's a really complicated place. And every policy you put on the table that I see people fighting to the death over, even though they know very little about it. I'm tempted to say nothing about it, but what they know about it is the one-liner they heard from MSNBC or from Fox, and they're fighting, and that's all they know is that one-liner. When did we lose the humility to say, I don't know as much as I need to know about that, or as much as I could know about that? And to learn more about it, I'm not going to learn it by talking to people that agree with me. I'm going to learn it by talking to people that disagree with me and have a different perspective. Yeah. And so I lean into those conversations with, tell me more about that, and just doing that, just that changes the whole conversation.
Yeah.
It's no longer a fight or a debate. It's, I'm really interested in knowing what you think about this, because I know what I think about, but I know a fraction of what I need to know. And so to me, that kind of humility is the secret sauce of bringing more people in, and genuinely being interested in what people with different opinions have.
Such a good reminder. We had a conversation earlier this year with Demetra from Braver Angels, and she really emphasized the need both for curiosity, but not curiosity in the sense of like I'm examining some specimen or something that's really foreign. It's more curiosity and a humility. And I'm thinking also Mike Allen from Axios recently said that our realities these days barely intersect. And so if we come with that awareness of what we're hearing in our teeny tiny pillar of news, and over here in someone else's tiny pillar of all the social media that's served up just for them, those realities may not intersect. And so hearing more from that perspective feels so important.
And because of that, one of the other techniques I love is, before we debate this issue, let's just list what we agree on, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, we all think illegal immigration should be curbed. Yes, we all think criminals who are here illegally should be deported. There's a lot of things at the heart of these issues that we kind of agree on, and then how we do it, we got different perspectives on that. But once you articulate the 5 or 6 things you agree on an issue, again, the conversation becomes a very different one, because you create a foundation of agreement, and then you can talk about your differences, and it doesn't fly off the rails. But I love doing that with people who are shocked to find out how much we agree.
Yeah, we'll include a report that Kettering and Gallup recently released, just showing how much agreement there is across the country, which it's truly exciting. I'm going to limit you to 30 seconds on this question if you can, but Sharon has a question about saying, thank you for the credential badging discussion. Are there civic engagement strategies that you incorporate AI into?
We have not yet. And I think that's something that we need to have internally a good conversation about.
Yeah. Sharon, if you have ideas, would love to hear those. Please follow up with us. For now, I want to be mindful of our time. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Ken, for all that you are doing nationwide. Looking forward to a fabulous 2026. We will include in the chat a chance to learn more about Team Democracy's work, and we'll follow up with other links. We have a really exciting lineup of courses and webinars for 2026, which, if you haven't heard, is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So a really big year. Early bird registration for Storytelling to Bridge Divides will end December 31st. So if you've not yet registered, there's a limited number of spaces. We would love to see you there. And I hope you'll join us in January for our next webinar to talk about a toolkit about what is next. For now, as you log off, there will be a 15-second poll that pops up. Please be a helper, share your thoughts. You help us inform future webinars. For now, be well, everyone. Do good. Happy Idealist Day. Happy holidays. And we will see you in the new year.